Roll call.
Ms. Linich.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Zittergruen.
Here.
Chisel.
Here.
Hadley.
Here.
Neal.
Here.
Is there anyone who wishes to bring something before the council that is not on the agenda? Okay. Mayor proclamation. Whereas Juneteenth, observed on June 19th each year, commemorates the emancipation of the last enslaved African Americans in the United States following the announcement of General Order Number 3 by Union Army General Gordon Granger on June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas, which declared all enslaved people in Texas free. And whereas Juneteenth has become a symbol of freedom and the enduring spirit of African Americans celebrating their resilience, cultural heritage, and contributions to our society. And whereas the recognition of Juneteenth offers an opportunity for reflection on the progress we have made as a nation and the work that remains in our pursuit of equality and justice for all. And whereas observing Juneteenth in Decorah provides an opportunity for all residents to celebrate our shared history, educate ourselves about the past, and commit to a future of inclusivity, understanding, and unity. And whereas the city of Decorah is dedicated to fostering a community that values diversity, equity, and inclusion, ensuring that every resident feels respected, heard, and valued. Now, therefore, I, Lorraine Borowski, Mayor of the City of Decorah, Iowa, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2024 as Juneteenth in the City of Decorah, and I encourage all residents to join in the celebration, reflection, and education activities to honor this significant day in our history. Consent agenda.
Item A, minutes of the June 3rd, 2024 meeting. B, claims. C, special event application, Loop de Loop, Chief Tyne and Scott Searcy. Item D, renewal special class C retail alcohol license with outdoor service, Luther College, Baker Commons. E, renewal special class C retail alcohol license with outdoor service, Luther College, Dahl Centennial Union. F, new special class C retail alcohol license with outdoor service, Nordic Fest. G, tobacco permits. H, resolution to forgive 2007 interdepartmental loan from general fund to tax increment financing fund. I, resolution to create Fund 024 and transfer fund balance as of June 28th, 2024 from Fund 310 to Fund 024 Electric Franchise Street. J, resolution to create Fund 121 and transfer fund balance as of June 28th, 2024 from Fund 003 to Fund 121 Local Option Sales Tax Fund. K, resolution to transfer $367.04 from 021 Gas Franchise Fee Fund to Fund 015 Sidewalk Fund to correct negative balance. L, resolution to transfer fund balance as of June 28th, 2024 of Fund 304 Locust Road to 121 New Local Option Sales Tax Fund. And M, resolution setting public hearing on proposed plan specifications, estimate of cost, and proposed form of contract for dry run WQI wetland project.
Motion to approve. Second. Second.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Olson. Any discussion?
Can you just clarify Fund 24, what the funds are?
So when we split out the sustainability, Jeremy wanted to have the street portion in a fund so he could see it. So 310 was available at the time and we put it in there. After working with Hacker and Nelson, it really shouldn't be in a 300 fund because those are capital projects. So she suggested creating the 024 and moving the funds there. So it's in the
Okay, so it's still just a street portion of
It's still
sustainability.
street, nothing's changed. It's just moving it to the correct number,
Okay.
account number.
And then we did have a local option sales tax fund in
We
the
do.
past.
It is the state, actually that fund is supposed to be in 121, so I'm just correcting it.
So it's an indexing.
It's just correcting it. The biggest thing is, so when I can train Renee going forward or whoever, it'll be easier on the budget side on the state.
So it's a lateral
He
move.
Does
It's a
also
lateral
assign
move and-
numbers in addition.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
A roll call?
Chisel.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Miscelinich.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Neal.
Hi.
Motion carried. Conduct public hearing on the plans, specifications, and form of contract and award bid for Decorah 2024 Street Improvement Asphalt Resurfacing Project. Gonna give some background first, please.
Sure, I'll combine backgrounds for items 6 and 7. 6 is the public hearing, and then 7 would be the actionable item of council. Public hearings required by state law based on the engineer's estimated cost of this proposed project. The hearing was set at the May 20th meeting. We have received no written comments or objections at this time. Proposed project includes 3 locations in town: Pleasant Hill Drive from Day Street to Locust Street, West Main Street from Grove Street west to the trail parking lot, and Grove Street from West Main Street to West Water Street. Only one bid was received by the city from Skyline Construction in the amount of $417,745.97, below the engineer's estimate of $422,000 even. City engineer recommends approval to Skyline Construction.
I'll open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Step to the podium, say your name and address.
Peter Vanderlinden, 101 Grove Street. I was just wondering when the project on Grove Street might take place and how long it would take. And any interruptions, to traffic and so on there.
I think I'll have to refer to Travis. Do you have any?
So we'll have to work, let's see, John on Zoom, but we'll have to work with the contractor. I mean, there's a substantial completion date. So I can update you a bit more on timeline and when that looks like after we award contract and discussions with the contractor. We don't have a definite when that work would begin.
Perhaps touch base, or if you could touch base back with them and give them some information when you.
Judy, is your email okay just to get back to you?
Any other comments? I'll close the public hearing. Consider resolution to approve the plans, specifications, and form of contract and award bid for Decorah Street 2024 Improvements Asphalt Resurfacing Project.
Move for approval. Second.
Moved by Chisel, seconded by Olson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Chisel.
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Miscelinich.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Hadley.
Aye.
Neal.
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider resolution setting WW wastewater treatment plant superintendent's salary. Can you give background on that, please?
Yes, so the council's discussed and approved through ordinance creation of a public works director position. And through attrition, the city was going to eliminate the assistant positions within the street department, water department, and the ability to eliminate positions at the wastewater treatment plant as well. The superintendent positions within those street department, water department, wastewater treatment plant, we've restructured their job descriptions so they have less responsibilities than the quote unquote current superintendents at the time. And they would then have a lower pay range than those that were existing at the time because of less responsibility. So as we set to appoint this position, council's already adjusted the pay ranges for street superintendent and public works director, with Mike accepting the position for public works director. That created the opening on the wastewater treatment plant superintendent. So that attrition is moving quickly. We need to have council adopt and set the new pay range that amends the personnel pay plan for the wastewater treatment plant superintendent. Again, this would be a range between $61,215 and $83,475 annually. That does not adjust until June 30, 2025.
Hadley will move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Hadley, approved by Neal. Discussion? Hearing none. Roll call?
Hadley,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Zittergrun,
Aye.
Jizzle,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Miscelinich.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider resolution to provide local match and agreement to maintain Carlson Park Trail improvements for a minimum of 20 years. Travis?
Yes, so this resolution is a requirement of the state recreational trail grant application. Staff's been working with the Carlson Park Bike Trail Coalition on leveraging their privately raised funds with the city's budgeted hotel motel tax funds. The resolution, again, required by SRT through the Iowa Department of Transportation, states that the city would contribute not to exceed of 120,000 of the hotel motel tax funds. That's what was budgeted in fiscal 24. And for both phases 1A and 1B, the coalition has raised an additional more than $150,000 that would jointly serve as the local match, exceeding the 25% minimum that SRT requires, with the additional coming from the application. We're proposing that the application be for Carlson Park Trail improvements, both phase 1A and 1B, because 1A, while estimated originally at $200,000, the only bid that came in was for $375,000. Now, granted, we believe that to be a bit of cherry picking and that the original engineer's estimate is probably closer to the right number. But knowing that one bid came in that high, plus preliminary estimate for phase 1B from Shuby Consulting is at $300,000, which was originally estimated at $260,000, which included design in that $260,000. There was no separate allocation for it. So leveraging local dollars with grant funds are going to be important, with both projects coming in what we believe to be over budget. So I know this delays rebidding phase 1A till we find out the results of this application, but I think it's a good move.
Council comments?
What kind of delay are we talking about here?
I believe anticipated award announcements are in October. The hope was that we would turn around and rebid quickly with a substantial completion date with two options, one being, let's see, the fall of 25 and then spring of 26. That way we could, the original bid had a substantial completion date of June 2025, and feedback from at least one other construction firm that was interested said I need at least fall of 25. So the plan was to rebid quickly so that we try and get that that project awarded. However, we know that this at least this one consultant said they can't bid and build it until fall of 25 anyway. Knowing where we're at for estimated project costs already over what we've got budgeted, and the phase 1B that had 260,000 as the budgeted amount included 100,000 in grant revenues as well to offset that phase 1B costs.
I think Would you check and see? I think Benji's got his hand up. Can you tell me if that he does? Okay. Thank you.
So
Just a hand cursor.
we are, so in this action, we would be applying for a grant, a maintenance grant for something that doesn't exist.
We'd be pledging that we're going to keep it in existence for 20 years, correct? For something that doesn't exist currently.
Okay.
And we'd be pledging a certain amount of money for 20 years. Or does it, just so we maintain?
No,
it?
that just that we
Okay.
would maintain it, that we're not gonna build it and in 2 years from now, develop it into apartment complex.
Okay, that's what I thought was read here. When you read it out loud, I thought you said something different. So thanks for the clarification. And this really won't slow anything down and we won't lose the grants we currently have.
We haven't secured any grants. Are you talking
Okay.
private donation
Yeah,
side?
yeah, sorry.
No, my understanding, talking with the Bike Trail Coalition, I had asked them similar questions. They didn't believe that was going to be an issue with any of the donors.
Okay.
In fact, being able to argue that we're trying to leverage our local dollars for a 75% grant match, we thought that would bode well with donors.
Okay, I make a motion that we move ahead with the local match agreement to maintain Carlson Park Trail improvements for a minimum of 20 years.
Parker will second.
Motion made by Neil, seconded by Parker. Any further discussion?
Just a couple more questions. Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, thanks. So we're agreeing to maintain a $500,000-$700,000, park build out. Do we have any estimate on the annual maintenance cost?
Do not.
I mean, I know that there's some volunteer maintenance. I know Emily's gonna want me to say that. So I know that, there's a great history in Decorah of volunteers maintaining our recreational bike trails, but it's hard for me. I think this is probably a good deal, but it's a bit, like I'm flying a bit, just hoping that it works out because, we don't know what we're committing to financially. And, I feel like, I don't know, that's maybe not a frustration related to this specific project, but maybe a more comprehensive frustration for me, how often we're asked to vote on things that we don't know what their long-term costs will be. And I'm not here to point fingers. I'm announcing that I wish that it was a different way. So.
And there also is there is also no qualification, I suppose, on what we have to keep it maintained to.
Right. No, I don't want to say just a verbal, yes, we're
Right.
not going to turn into an apartment complex. But yes, that is what it's meant to be. You're just going to continue to operate as a mountain bike trail system.
And in order to apply for this grant, we have to actually approve this resolution, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise
Without this resolution.
we can't
no
even
grant
apply for the grant
application.
at all, right?
Correct.
So I don't think we can develop it into anything other than a park, can we? By the donation.
Correct. By the donation
Right.
deed
Right.
restriction, yes. But I was being a bit facetious when I said yes, apartments, but let's say the 10 years down the road, it's not mountain biking anymore. It's a different,
Cross-country skiing.
yeah, maybe that. We would still need to maintain a mountain bike trail system for 20 years.
I guess a follow-up question, I know that when we were considering this, when we were doing budget discussions, this number that we're now, it seems destined to overshoot. That was already kind of at the edge of maybe where staff was comfortable in terms of spending down our hotel motel money, given all of the other, long-term projects that Parks and Rec is considering, including the eventual really expensive need for repaving of our share of the Trout Run Trail. And so I guess what I'm saying is, if we get this grant, are we going to come in at under the number that we originally intended to come in under, or are we, is that what you're saying? Is that
Right,
yeah.
that's why I'm saying that's why the resolution, excuse me, is drafted in a way that says 120,000 in hotel motel tax dollars is our limit.
Yeah.
So that the privately raised donations will make up more than 25% of that local match. So as you can see, those Shuby Consulting estimates are around 300,000. I've already asked him what his partnership with LRE would be to take a look at IMBAs, take a second look and further itemized out Because if you look at the deliverables of that, of Shuby Consulting as opposed to IMBA, I think there's a benefit to get the Shuby Consulting perspective on it, along with the fact he is working with a licensed engineer.
Yeah, it does seem to me that this is the way to go forward. I hate to see this number get even bigger. And I sure hope that we get this grant. I also, I know I'm asking questions here, but I really want to commend the people who've been involved in fundraising to put us in a position to not need to slow the whole thing down and rethink it. That fundraising that's been done privately has really helped make this thing happen. So thanks to you all out there.
Any other discussion? Roll call?
Neil,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Neil, or sorry, Miss Linich,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Motion carried. Consider resolution for transferring of RSVP funds to quasi endowment fund.
What we're trying to do here with the RSVP with their cuts, also they are doing a lot of fundraising. And so they want to transfer those funds into the endowment fund. So this will not be any of the state or federal grants because by law they have to go through our finance, but this would just so to keep the donated fund separate. Which with RSVP, we really haven't, we're just basically the financial agent anyway. We don't really have much of a say there.
I'd move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Neil. Discussion?
I just want to give a shout out to RSVP and the outstanding organization that it is. I'm sure it accounts for thousands of hours of donated time that seniors give to this community. I know my wife and I are involved with, up at this visitor center, we volunteer on the weekends to help out up there. We volunteered with the Pen Pal program, which matched us up with a third grader that we wrote pen pals back and forth, letters. There's another program that I was involved in with the veterans, where the veterans, they match them up with people that are veterans in nursing homes and stuff like that. And those are just a few of the things that they do, but they do an outstanding job of community service to the public. So commend what they do.
Is this related to just future donations going forward, or is there a fund balance that is comprised of donated funds that we're going to start with?
This specific resolution has it as not exceeding 30,000 because there are the donations are ready to be moved over. And this resolution will be yearly. So if there's future donations that are sitting there at the end of the fiscal year, always get the council's permission to move those over to the endowment fund.
I don't want to be too pedantic. I'm just, how does the library ascertain whether it's a donated fund or a federal grant dollar that they're spending during the year? So like at the end of the year, are they trying to move into an endowment fund every single donated dollar they got? Or do they spend from both pools and then they want to move what's left over at the end? How does that work?
They have to spend their federal and their state dollars through the year. So there's not money to be.
So any balance left over is just
Yeah,
default
and they
donated?
track,
Okay,
and they
all right.
track it just the way they have to also do the reporting for the state and federal grants. It's all tracked.
The federal guidelines are pretty strict as far as what they can do.
Very
and not
strict.
do.
Any more questions?
Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Neil,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Miss Linich,
Aye.
Olson.
Aye.
Zittergruen.
Motion carried. Consider an ordinance amending Title VI Animals of the Decorah Municipal Code, first reading. Get background on that, please.
Yes, so this is drafted as a first reading. However, similar to the sign ordinance, it's in a position that council can approve the first reading if you want. You can start the ball rolling, get additional feedback from residents. Or you don't have to approve any first reading. You can say, this is what we like. This is what we don't like. Go back to the drawing board. But the proposed ordinance as a result of discussion previously had the June 3rd council meeting on dog bite incidents. As opposed to the typical approach that we've done where we provide a red line that shows existing code and proposed changes based on that. This is essentially starting over for many sections of code. So more specifically, those sections 1, 3, and 5 of the ordinance. Couple areas I wanted to point out for council, there's a portion highlighted in section 1 that includes that the city shall auction an animal impounded that was running at large if not claimed by the owner within 5 days. Typically, there is some kind of, and I'm going to use the term, it does not, dispose, like when we dispose of city-owned property, it doesn't mean throw away. It means either sell or somehow get rid of. I'm going to use the term dispose of an animal that's been abandoned essentially by its owner. If we've impounded it and it's been in our care for 5 days, this is a means that we would have to dispose of, meaning get rid of an alive animal at that time. Can't stress that enough. But we need some means to, after so long that it's deemed abandoned, and then what do you want us to do with it? This was a provision in Marshalltown's, yes. Okay,
Okay.
was this a Des Moines one then?
No, it was Marshalltown, but that's not to say that they didn't follow a separate procedure.
Gotcha.
And
So,
this has,
so yes, instead of using the word auction, can we just refer to an administrative policy that references Northeast Iowa and beloved the animal place?
Or even just,
Humane Society.
maybe even just reference after 5 days, it's deemed abandoned and the city may dispose of.
Yeah, I just want to not use that word.
I don't want to use that word either.
Nor dispose.
Either word. I think,
Turn it over to authorities. I turn it over to
So,
or Humane Society. or-
Here's where.
Do we have an agreement with the human, I mean, we have an agreement with the Humane Society. I mean, I know historically our policy was if we wouldn't keep a dog for 5 days, it'd go to the Humane Society. I mean, at some point we have to, because the city help funds it.
Right, and even if it goes to the Humane Society, it at some point needs to be deemed abandoned and no longer that individual person's property.
But would that be the Humane Society's point at that time?
I'm gonna
what
let
if we,
John-
what if we just said that after 5 days, the city will take possession of the abandoned animal?
assume ownership or something like
Yep,
that? Yeah.
and then
that-
the admin workflow and process isn't in the ordinance because it might change over time, but we don't say dispose or auction.
That's a good idea.
Uh,
if you can come up with another word, it just might be good to have something in the ordinance that authorizes city staff to,
No
use-
longer own.
right, transfer the animal.
The animal become the ward of the city.
Well, we don't want it to be a ward of the city. That's it.
We don't, City Hall don't. No.
No, no.
I was just reading the municipal complex thing. We could add so I would like to propose that instead of the use auction, that that the city shall transfer ownership of the abandoned animal to, whether whether you write it in where it goes or whether you don't, but
I wouldn't, because in one of our most recent examples, they refused to take possession of if it's a dangerous animal.
right.
That's where, yes, I know dispose of isn't the right term for all dogs that we want to, not the, but anyway, there might be situations that,
Well, you transfer ownership somewhere else then.
right.
We
I'm
don't
just
hold,
pointing that out.
yeah.
Like we need to have that ability as well. If the Humane Society says absolutely not, we're not taking this animal.
And if there's nobody else to adopt it take ownership of it, I would think you would want to give, in extreme situations, authority to the city staff without having to come back to the council.
Yeah, transfer ownership, right? That if property is lost, we take ownership of it after X number of times, and then we do have an auction. But that auction is a admin process. You don't come to us and be like, we found a bike, right?
But we do have a policy that talks about again, the word dispose is in there, the disposal of city-owned property. And so
So I guess my question is, so we're looking at changing this ordinance. Is this a recent issue that we have an animal that has showed up or that the city has gotten and nobody's willing to take it and we're stuck with it? And is that?
So we did have a recent one, yes, that Northeast Iowa, the Humane Society does not have the means to essentially even feed or water an animal without actually handling it. Like they have to open the cage and have somebody put in dog food and water with the dog in there. And I believe that animal had to go somewhere else as a result, where they could essentially have, like a slot, they slide the dog food under and they slide the water under, but nobody can really make contact with the animal in that situation. So that's where I really I would not advise building Northeast Iowa Humane Society into the ordinance. And again, in extreme circumstances, I don't know that we should pigeonhole ourselves into the inability to unfortunately go to maybe extreme measures on animals that the Humane Society would say are not eligible for adoption because of their behavior.
Can
Here's
we
the
just say,
email. I can hear it.
can we have become property of the city?
And I think, again, John was saying before, but we also need the ability to have it no longer be our property.
You want us to explicitly say somehow that the city has the authority to put down an animal that we don't have another good recourse for? Is that, I'm hearing you correctly, right? We should stop talking around it.
Mhm.
I think that's an important authority for a city to have at last measure. And I trust our staff to not use that injudiciously. And so, to the extent that you can put that in there in a way that's not going to attract, like auction is such a weird word, and even dispose of is a weird word. And so I would suggest that be part of a list of less extreme actions. And at the very end, and in some extreme circumstances, the city may choose to destroy the animal. And humanely euthanize. I just know that the word destroy is what's used in this world. It's not.
Right.
And we can't be euphemistic about it. We can't say the city will send it to our uncle's farm up north, because that's not what's happening. I think part of a list that makes it clear that is our last option, because it is. I think that's where we all stand together.
So why not say something like, will become property of the city with euthanization as a last resort or something like that?
I think it's more maybe a procedural thing, but we need to first take ownership, and then that could be a
Right, so
measure.
it becomes property of the city.
Yep.
With euthanization for cause if needed or necessary, something like that.
Do you want further authority to be able to transfer ownership?
Yeah.
Well, if we own that,
We need to
if we own it
delineate
becomes property of
other
the city,
steps
can't we do
we
anything
take.
with it?
Well, how about for city staff, just to have that, to make sure it's clear? I mean, yeah, I guess I'm not sure how.
How about wording it in a way that puts it in line with I know disposal is not a term that we're likely to use in this situation, but in line with our policy on disposal of city-owned property.
Yeah, I would just be consistent with whatever language we have, with
Sure.
the additional language about in extreme circumstances can humanely euthanize.
Yes, great.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But, okay.
So we'll have to come back.
Well,
I think
yeah,
if you
yeah, we'll
say,
come
I
back
think
on
if you
that.
say, I think if you use language that then says in extreme cases, humanely euthanize, I think that's a fine way to say it.
And I do think we could also kind of point out too, like, if a dog is deemed vicious, and it is vicious, and then the city has it, that's great. But let's say somebody's Labradoodle shows up, traveling through town, we can't find it. Northeast Iowa animal, or the kennel up there is full. I don't want an easy way out to put down a
Oh,
dog
right.
or something like that. I was
Right,
like,
right.
well, they can't take it, so we're gonna put it down.
Yeah, I'll
I-
drive,
I-
I'll drive
I-
it to another shelter if need be. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
there will
there's-
be lots of things.
Whole, but
Yeah.
You know, I do need to put in there, I do think we need to put in there too, like if we take possession of an animal and it is deemed vicious, and I do think that there needs to be some language on that as opposed to just,
Like steps that we would take before we get to that
yeah, yeah.
last thing.
So why not have it becomes property of the city for the city to, sell blah as deemed necessary under extreme cases where the dog is unsafe for the public. The city is authorized to humanely euthanize.
I like that.
Just
yeah.
spell it all out.
Yeah, that's
Right,
what I was
right.
getting at. Like, we need to really kind of spell this out. I just don't wanna, go down there.
So you probably will work on this and bring it back.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
bring
work
it
on
back.
language and bring back.
Can I make, oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say I have a few more general comments, but
Mhm.
you want to go first?
Do we need to just table this then?
Well, and there's another item I do want to point out, at least one more item I want to point out in the ordinance that maybe council wants to consider addition or take out. But in section 5 of the proposed ordinance, there, under city code section 6.20.010, this is the code section that council just amended to include the electronic leash and removing the at heel under an owner's verbal command. This does add a restriction that the leash be no longer than 6 feet in length. And just pointing out, this is, the park board made a similar recommendation to the 28E Trail Committee for the Trout Run Trail, that dogs on Trout Run Trail be limited, have a 6-foot leash limit. So I'm just, for continuity, pointing that out. That park board make recommendation to the 28E Trail Committee for Trout Run Trail that users of Trout Run Trail be limited to a 6-foot long leash.
So
Or an e-collar?
electronic collars are not allowed then on the trail. Is that-
I don't know that e-colors are allowed on the trail.
They weren't previously, I don't think. but I don't
Yeah.
think.
I feel like we have already dealt with that, and e-collars make sense. And I guess so my only concern about a 6-foot leash is if nobody is around and grandma's walking her little Scotty and it has one of those really long leashes, I mean, that's not posing a threat to anybody. Right? Why should she be in violation of city code? Because, I mean, the dog's on a leash. There's nobody around. It's just one of those retractable, unretractable leashes, and they're longer than 6 feet.
It is on the trail though, don't you think? Because of bikers coming by it.
When the officer comes,
It's beyond the trail. I
when
thought
the
whatever.
officer comes and my Chihuahua is on the leash and I have a 36-foot leash, I'm gonna reel the dog in,
Yeah.
right?
Right,
Like,
but if you get a biker coming up behind you, right, that's all I was, as far as why they put it on the bike trail is a problem.
So to some extent, I do see limiting the length, because if we don't, in theory, if I've got a 100-foot rope tethered to my dog and we're walking down the street, it's on a leash.
Fishing line.
Yeah.
Well, you-
Well, it's gotta be sufficient that it can't break free. Well, 100-pound
100-pound
test
tail,
on,
yeah, I know.
on a Chihuahua, that'll work. But I do get to some extent limiting the length of it. 6 foot is what was in the ordinance, and I am simply pointing out that that was a recommendation made by Park Board to the Trails Committee.
If you want a length, I mean, maybe one would be a 6-foot leash, a leash of fixed length of no longer than 6 feet, or a retractable leash that could be shortened to 6 feet or shorter. I mean, that would be one way to get there. If you're looking for advice, I'm seeing
Yeah.
heads nodding.
At least that can get to,
Yeah.
that's fine with me, as long as e-collars are still there.
I'm seeing heads nodding, so maybe that's worth a note.
Yeah, and the e-collars are still permissible under the draft.
Great.
I have other notes.
I mean,
so that we don't have
as
to.
far as like under the draft of, so if they're on a leash, they have to be 6 feet, or a retractable leash that can go down to 6 feet.
That's what we're hearing generally from the council here, yes.
Okay. And then, but e-collars are also permissible on the trails as well.
No, I don't believe, when you say trails, you mean city owned, like Van Penen, Palisades, those trails? Or are you talking Trout Run Trail? Because Trout Run Trail has a separate committee that is established by 28E that sets the rules around it, comprised of both city and county official representation. So they establish the rules of Trout Run Trail. That's why Park Board made a recommendation to them.
I just had two things, just so that we don't end up having to go back again to rewriting. One, you eliminate the dog warden position, but the dog warden shows up in a few other sections. And so you might want to do a search for dog warden and make sure that we're not referencing it elsewhere. And two, this proposed code seems to do more so than other places in our ordinances. It seems to do more in terms of outlining police procedure. And I feel this is not my area of expertise or anything, but I want to make sure that you've had, you look through this carefully and make sure it aligns with departmental manuals. I assume you have your own procedural policy book. Is that right, Chief? Right. I just don't want to have to go through a bylaw amendment process every time new data comes out about effective policing and you decide to update your departmental policies. And so I think it would be worth looking at this with an eye towards, is this stuff that we're okay baking into law, or is this something that would be better left in the policy book, the departmental manual? Because it's like, this is what they shall do when they, you will appoint an investigative officer for this. And I just could imagine that seems more like staff decision and less like we make a law. So that's general comment. John?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I would like to get rid of some of that stuff, but when I get questions about the prior code, it was so vague and it didn't have these things that we needed something to say, okay, who can determine that this dog is vicious? And there's gotta be some due process for the dog owner. So, I would like to slim this down, but.
I'm okay. If the chief is okay with what comes out of this, I am too, but I want to encourage you to take a good look and make sure that this isn't tying your hands in a way that you would feel unfortunate to have them tied until we could change the code. And, there's gotta be, I agree, John. I think maybe the former code was too vague. But this code tells us what to do with Gila monsters. And there's gotta be somewhere in between. Because I want our code to be short enough that average people can read it and understand it pretty quickly.
I also do think like this ordinance too, back to kind of the circling back a little bit too. So you have the Trout Run Trail as a whole, and some portion of it is in the city limits of Decorah, and a lot of a portion of it is outside of the city limits of Decorah. If you're outside of the city limits of Decorah, what's the enforcement of people not following those leash laws? I mean, you see what I'm saying? Is that something that it just only applies within the city limits of Decorah, or is it the solid trail?
So our ordinances do apply to city-owned parks. The Trout Run Trail is not a city-owned park. It's a 28E agreement for a bunch of easements. There might be a few places where there's fee title. So to answer your question, I don't think our city code would apply on the Trout Run Trail outside of the city limits. I'm trying to think of an exception. Like Van Penen is outside the city limits, but our city code applies there.
Well, what I'm saying is like the enforcement action of this within the city limits, obviously if it's on the trail, right?
We can enforce it.
We can enforce it. If it's outside of the city limits, what's the enforcement measure out there?
County ordinance. And well, and I'm not sure that there is much in the way of county ordinance for dog. It's
But you see where I'm getting at it. Like if we have this on here, and it's a city of Decorah stretch that has this limitations, I do think it needs to be a totality of the Trout Run Trail with county and Decorah all coming together saying, if this is a necessary thing as far as the restrictions of animals on the trail, I don't want to limit that the stretches through Decorah are more restrictive than the ones out in the county. Does that make sense?
It does. And
because I think it also kind of a little bit of confusion. If you got somebody coming here, it's like, there's this invisible line where you cross into Decorah, where you cross out of Decorah, that there's no posting, there's no nothing. What's the enforcement measure? Is 3/4 of the trail
Can
you
you
know,
ride, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, you could put your dog in they have those dog bike things,
Yeah.
right? They might not be on a leash and they might be on the trail. Is that illegal?
If it's in the city limits, according to this.
But you're talking like the little arm extension thing off the bikes that
The little
then
buggy
connect
things
to the
up-
dog,
right.
dog's
Well, some
collar.
dogs.
Oh,
they
they're
don't,
installed like a covering,
Oh,
like riding like
like a
a
sidecar?
child.
Yeah,
Yeah, only pull them behind their bike.
yeah, they do,
Yeah.
I mean, they ride their bikes with their dogs all different ways. I mean, I've seen people riding their bike with their dog running by them. I mean,
Oh,
I'm not gonna lie, my dog on the trail, if a bike comes sits, waits for that dog biker to go.
I think you have two options, either one, adopt the code that you want and try to convince the 28E to adopt a similar provision for the Trout Run Trail, or make an exemption on the Trout Run Trail in the city of Decorah for the city code. I mean, that gets a little confusing, and apply the Trout Run Trail rules.
I mean, I feel like we should make the code we want in Decorah.
Yeah. And I also feel like we just went through this.
Me too.
So,
Thought that too.
yeah, so I'm confused. I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of confused why this is bringing up and restricting this area when it's about the trail and not about the city, but necessarily it's about the trail within just a little portion of the city. I guess my opinion is we have a dog at large code section. And it should apply to the trail and the city of Decorah.
I agree.
That's my opinion.
Is there-
Do you and Emily volunteer to look at the 2080 agreement to?
Yeah, I'll definitely go. Okay.
Then I make a motion to table and investigate the language to homogenize with 2080 code, and also to address the disposal of real property.
Second.
Motion made by Hadley, seconded by Olson to table and be brought back.
But I also know you want comments, and I have not related to this part about animals, because this came up, I think I emailed you, but it might have been at a bad time. When it comes to fowl, and in the city limits, I think I forwarded you an email about some complaints about number of fowl and rabbits. So things that are allowed within the limit, we don't limit how many a person can have. So in that bothersome section, I guess I would like some language as to a little bit more what could be constituted as,
Livestock.
well, you know, like, I mean, we've had some concerns about people who have so many chickens and so many rabbits and fowl in town that it's almost as if they're running a rabbit and chicken farm. In which case, how do we address that? This doesn't seem to address that well yet. So
Does not.
I guess I would like us to look at that section just a little bit more. And then the other thing is that at one point we say we can't have swine and sheep, but then there's another point in the code, which I think in the bothersome animals, it talks about swine and sheep, but they're not supposed to have them in the first place. So I can find it again.
You're not supposed to have leopards either, but they're talking about all.
It was. Yeah, it says to keep in this bothersome animal, but not limited to barking dogs, cattle, horses, swine, sheep. But we already said that we can't have them in city limits anyway. Is that,
That's an inconsistency that we should correct. What,
Okay. That's under bothersome animals. It's really the bothersome animals section that I think.
But-
I'm on 6.12.010.
And that only prevents those animals if they're making a lot of noise. So did you say there was another section though, where it says? you
No,
can't-
there isn't. I mean, there really is. I don't know what section it would go under, but I do know that like, oh, there were ducks too. I think there are ducks, fowl, and rabbits making a lot of noise in large quantities.
This, we had a municipal infraction involving a rooster,
We did.
Blondie.
We did.
And
And it was very expensive. And I guess I would like a code that
And-
made it so that we didn't have to have another $10,000 case
Yeah,
for
yeah.
an infraction.
I mean, it does come down to subjectivity.
Yeah.
I mean, when somebody's dog barks, is that bothersome the first time, or is it repeated? I mean, I'm open to suggestions, but it gets hard to define. And yeah, it's, we certainly can work on beefing it up though.
Well, I'm just curious if there's any appetite for, I mean, and I don't even know myself how I feel, right? Limiting the amount of fowl that you can have in your backyard. Or, because right now we have no limit on how many chickens you could have. So you could have, 20 chickens and 15 ducks in your backyard.
Has that been the case in any place?
I am not,
My understanding is that number has dwindled down over time.
Natural selection.
Not so natural.
let's just say.
Dogs are taking care of them.
There are a few places with a lot of fowl in town.
Which actually triggered for me, and this is, I can't recall, this ordinance does not address it, but along those lines, if that's the path we want to address fowl, some communities prohibit the raising of meat chickens and butchering of chickens for that purpose.
Well, we could just define it as livestock and say any animal over X number,
X number.
X number becomes agricultural. I mean, right? Like
Mhm.
you can't have more than X number of cars. You can't have X number of houses. I think having X number of animals.
I don't want to be devil's advocate, but I got 2 beehives within the city limits of Decorah.
No, well, that's-
Agricultural.
That's X.
And probably there's 160,000 of them across the street from my house.
Total weight.
Don't cause like a can of worms here, right? I'm just saying, or a hive of bees. I do think that if there is a way to look at a few other animal codes, to think about fowl, particularly sensitive to bird flu right now, that is growing and would be of great concern if we had lots of fowl in town, which, concentrated in small areas. And I think there are more than one location where we have lots of fowl in town concentrated in very small areas. So.
Would it be cheaper just to release 6 boxes a year?
Or a wolf, one wolf, snake.
There are
Or a
foxes.
vicious dog.
That might be maybe it's the fox that took care of the problem.
Right.
So,
Table had.
I would say
Yeah.
motion to table's been made. I don't mean a stickler.
No, but we have not- Why don't
Yeah.
we do a roll call for tabling this? Roll call? Maybe after we do that, how about if I have you make a comment after we,
Hadley,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Miss Linnet,
Aye.
Zittergren.
Aye.
Chisel.
motion carried. Yes, if you come up, I'll give you a few minutes to share what you have.
Thank you.
State your
David
name and
Com.
address. Yeah.
Yeah,
thank
David
you.
Com, 607 John Street. Just want to make a few comments related to the
Mm.
first part of the new vicious dog ordinance. Not going to touch on trails or poultry. First, I just wanted to thank the members of the city council, the mayor, John Anderson, and the police department for taking this so seriously and dealing with it quickly. My wife was the second person bitten by the dog in question that sort of prompted this. And I could give you a full history of that dog's behavior in our neighborhood, but I think you're pretty aware of it. He's a habitual offender. Let me just put it that way. So I want to thank you for doing that. I couldn't find the ordinance online to look at it myself. And I wasn't at the last council meeting, but I looked at the video of it and was very pleased to hear that people are serious about this and understand that there are threats to public health that need to be dealt with, even if they are the property of someone else. Just 2 questions, I guess, to follow up. Is anything that might be done with the revised ordinance, does that apply to the current case, the current dog in question? For example, is it grandfathered in that way? And the second question is, what is the status of that dog? As we walk by the house now, we don't know if it's in there, waiting to get its revenge on us. If it's still, it still is confined somewhere and might be coming back home in a few days. I guess if we could have some update on the status or what to expect of that.
It would not be retroactive, but it wouldn't need to be retroactive.
Say
Which
that
means
again?
we'd have to wait for it to bite us again before.
Public health has already met and deemed it a vicious animal and ordered it be euthanized.
Okay, we didn't know that. I was looking for their minutes and couldn't find them.
Yep, public health has already deemed it vicious and they ordered euthanization.
Okay, so that dog's not coming back to our neighborhood. Thank you all. We appreciate it. And
Okay.
thank you for your department.
Thanks, Dave. I just wanted to add one more thing. There was some concern with the council whether the word was getting out to the public of this discussion we're having in reference to dogs. And I did receive another complaint last week. And without going into the details of that complaint, it was based on a result of them hearing about the conversations we were having about this. So the word is getting out at least to one person anyway.
Yeah, well, I'll add one more. I don't want to take all your time. My wife and I like dogs. We don't like being bitten or threatened by dogs, but we are dog lovers.
Well, and one of the reasons why we're working diligently with this is our previous code was not tight. It was less than tight, probably.
Well, thank you, guys.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Consider an ordinance amending Decorah's sign ordinance and creating chapter 15.20 of the Decorah Municipal Code. And this is a second reading.
So assuming council adopts the revised language that the first reading was approved of at the last meeting, those updates were made in red with a red line. Again, to recap, the proposed original changes are in blue line. There were some events that resulted in staff proposing alternative language to the original. Those were added and highlighted in yellow. And then the motion made at the last meeting had some other changes. Those are shown as red line. So this, if council moves forward with this version, this is a second reading.
Have you had any comments, written or oral?
No.
I'll make a motion to pass the sign ordinance.
The second reading.
This is the second reading.
I second.
Motion made by Neil, seconded by Zittergruen. Pass the second reading. Discussion.
Just, I want to be clear, there's two versions. I know this is what you just spelled out, but one is as written now and one is just redlined or whatever. I guess I'm looking for the, there's two versions in the Dropbox, I guess.
Yeah, I'm recommending the all comments alternative V2 with all of the changes added.
Which of the two is that? I guess
Second one, I think.
the
Yeah, it's got
number
red, blue,
12, amending city code all. So my question about that, I think, gosh, I'm looking for the 100 and 200. I just saw the 200 feet was still somewhere, but maybe I need to find electronic. I just want to make sure that the change did make it in there. Did we spell 100 or?
No, I think you're right that it's still in there. 15.20.60. Is that where you're looking?
I saw it once.
Blue, I thought it was blue.
Yeah, electronic sign and then
Because there
that's
are
ambient
two
light
that are-
levels.
There were two distances that were really close, like one line says 250, the other line said, or one line said 150, the other line said 250. I didn't know.
So it's C, electronic sign shall not display an illuminated brightness exceeding 3 foot. Measured at a distance of
You know what
150
happened?
feet.
So- PDF and put it in Dropbox as that, it appears to have accepted my changes already. That is the one that changed to 100. So under section 15.20.060.
You say that again,
Item-
15.0.
15.20.060 electronic sign regulations, paragraph D, that was the change to 100 feet,
Yeah.
which was in blue line when I had it in Word document. But when I went to print to PDF, it apparently accepted that change, as well as the two other changes proposed, which was changing shall or to may under wayfinding signs. Grab that section. Off premises wayfinding signs.
You would delete that line about them being not returned to,
Correct. Under E, paragraph E, subsection F, that used to read, the city shall remove wayfinding signs. And at the end said, and it was our property,
Yeah.
would not return the sign to them. So that was removed. And then under wayfinding, with the adoption of a program to specify dimensions and location, it said the city council shall adopt by resolution, and we changed that to may.
yeah.
That was the third change.
So it was my second. So if Emily's okay with it, could we make that a friendly amendment to your
Yes.
motion to pass the second reading as it was passed last week with those three changes? Provided John's okay with that,
I'm okay. I mean, I think it's the second reading of.
what we passed last week.
Yes.
That's the motion.
Looking at this, I think, the version that alternate V3 that's in Dropbox, if that's right, Travis.
Oh, that's weird. There are two copies of it that.
It's the V, yeah.
Can we, for the third reading, have it clean lined?
Yep.
Can we write it and clean line it? So that way we know for sure. I feel like there are multiple, I feel like we got it to where we wanted it last week or 2 weeks ago. And now there just seems to be many versions.
Yeah, we will have a clean, so there'll be no red lines, no highlights, no blue line, just clean. This is for adoption.
Okay, so we've had a motion and a second. Roll call?
Neil,
Aye.
Zittergruen, Parker,
Aye.
Misselinich,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Chisel,
No.
Hadley.
Aye.
Establish a scoring committee for Dalen property request for qualifications.
Okay, so council has issued the request for qualifications for the Dalen property at the May 20th council meeting with due date of June 28th. Primarily selected that because the new Parks and Recreation Director, which I can't remember if we've announced publicly at a council meeting or not, but Mark Holte, formerly of the Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Association, will be our new Parks and Rec Director. Everything is formalized and he will start July 1. So with a June 28th due date, he will be on board and can be part of that evaluation process on the RFQs. Staff has sent this out to over a dozen consulting firms, and I personally have spoken with, I would say 8 to 10, certainly at least a half a dozen. Whether it's clarifications on the RFQ, wanting to know what anticipated budget on the construction side was going to be. I've received direct communication with, again, I believe 8 to 10, with knowing it's at least a half dozen, and I anticipate at least 6 responses to this RFQ. A lot of good firms that have inquired about it. It's probably going to take some interviews by hopefully a panel, a committee established for this, anticipating that a combination of park board and council members participating in it. If we can go with maybe 3 council members and 2 park board members, that does keep below a quorum. However, if it's going to make a recommendation of council, I still have to post it as an agenda, don't I? So never mind. We don't need to keep it below a quorum number, because as soon as I said it out loud, I was like, that doesn't matter. But,
Explain the reasoning behind that again, just more slowly.
right, so, typically if not even a committee, I don't want to call it that, but if three or fewer of you get together, I don't need to post an agenda for anything because it's not a quorum present.
Right.
However, if three or fewer of you are essentially assigned formally to be a task force of sorts to work on something and bring it back to the council for policy consideration, then it is a formal meeting regardless of the quorum number. So if you guys are assigned as a group, and I'm not talking just even mayoral appointment type, although that would probably still apply as well. So
Well-
if it's coming back to the council to make a recommendation on some matter, then it's a formal meeting.
Thank you.
But if it was not coming back to council to make a recommendation, it wouldn't need to be posted.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. So with that, don't worry about numbers of, but I still do think maybe 3 council and 2 park board would be, you'd have 5 elected officials. I'm not trying to be I have a very good relationship with a number of these firms and knowledge of several of these firms that have interest that Decorah has never worked with as well. So I would say myself, Mark Holte as well at a minimum, and then other staff might be beneficial as well.
I think that's a great idea. I don't know what it says action requested, but I don't know if you're looking for a motion because this is not really a motionable type thing.
I just wanted to leave it open so that council could take action for it. But if a straw poll could be taken on who's interested, let's say only 3 hands go up. If the mayor is willing to appoint,
I'd be interested.
Randy, Christopher, and Kirsten all have their hands up. This is scoring RFQs.
scoring RFQs and potentially interviewing process to come back to the full board for recommendation.
My doctor told me to avoid RFQs for a while, so.
Anticipate this like July.
Early July, correct. Again, part of the reason of putting this in front of council ahead of the due date was to keep this project, the review process moving along. Park Board meets on Thursday. I will ask them the same to get 2 Park Board members that will also participate. And once I get submittals, I know which 3 from council. Once I know which 2 from Park Board, I'll ask for availabilities. And then as the responses to the RFQ come in, I will tell them these are when we are going to have interview dates, keep these days open.
Can I make a recommendation? What about someone from Air and Water on sustainability? Given the nature of the site, could we see about someone from especially water? If they're going to be designing for a space?
I mean, you can. I'm sorry. I was just trying to think of who's on there.
I'm just thinking about if you're interviewing firms who are going to be designing for a sensitive space along a waterway, right? I mean, why not include, we've got a sustainability commission with experts on air and water. Why not ask someone from the Air and Water Committee to be on there? I'm thinking either Molly or Michelle Barnes, who does one for grants. I mean, Michelle Barnes has that on her radar constantly. If there's any type of innovative, bioremediation or retention, or, I mean, to be able to ask those kinds of questions, I'm just throwing out fancy words that I don't know anything about, but
I'm chuckling because I just had a thought and I looked up to see, I know he's not going to be on there, but what about the potential for reaching out? I know this was very much a passion, stormwater management practices, runoffs, and he's currently working for iDolls. And has a son that plays baseball and
that's fine. I
like,
mean, I would just.
no, I mean, I hope this doesn't offend John by any means, but what about potentially reaching out to Jeremy, who
Jeremy.
did serve in as a city engineer for so many years?
That
and
would be great.
is now- Right.
Jeremy would be great. Again, I was just thinking of someone who's got, if you're interviewing firms, I think it's always important to have sustainability on your mind in terms of how we build.
And
And whether that's solar or,
and that was specifically called out in the RFQ, just can't publicly state that enough, being concerns about stormwater management practices, runoff, as well as the solar and battery installation.
so if Jeremy can't, I would think about Michelle.
Right.
She's got a similar background.
Are you okay if I work with Mayor
Mhm.
Borowski on that component?
I think that's wonderful. And if we could have the scoring, not the scoring, but the actual responses in Dropbox, since they'll be public
Mhm.
record once they're received.
Yep.
I would appreciate just a link to the Dropbox of all the responses
Okay.
prior to scoring.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on municipal building. I'm gonna let you work with that.
Okay, so in Dropbox now, I have in there multiple documents. It's also if you opened the council packet folder file, excuse me, which was so large I couldn't attach it to Outlook because the file size was too big. But under items 14, there's several documents. So we'll start with 14A quickly. That is the feasibility, or excuse me, facility assessment from Brunton Architecture that came back and identified approximately $9 million worth of improvements that they said were needed, for lack of a better term. I don't know how best to quantify it with the building. I took that information, their spreadsheet, and if you go to 14B, this is a document I created using their numbers with a column on the, so you'll see like a left 2/3 that says Decorah City Hall, opinion of probable cost for existing building renovations, additions, and 10-year maintenance or repairs. That's all their information that they compiled. And on the right, essentially third, is city manager opinion on implementation with 4 columns that I titled should, need, should, will have to, and do without. Need is what I would recommend. This is truly a need that we have to move forward with. Should is something that could potentially be a code issue or something along those lines that it's not quite need that we have to implement this, but there may be a trigger. For example, the dais does not have an ADA accessible entry point up to the dais here. That's a should. This should be ADA compliant, but it doesn't need to because at this time we don't have that true need. Will have to is primarily mechanical failures that are going to happen at some point, but they're not a need to do immediately, nor are they something we should do as a code compliant issue. And do without is quite frankly that. It's something that maybe other implementations could be made. For example, in addition to the fire station to create a PPE specific room, we don't need to we can do without if we install appropriate exhaust mitigation measures, and we do other things to implement. We can do without that. Let's see here. So I want to point out on my columns, I do not adjust for any inflationary rate in the summary page, but I do include the same inflation rate they did with Brunton as you move left to right. So their top few rows have a 5-year inflation rate within that subtotal. I did apply the same 5-year rate in that section just so you can get apples to apples on what they are comparing. And then they do have a 10-year inflationary rate below as well for the next cluster. When we get down to page, I think it's 5 of that document, page 170 in the council packet has totals of need, 921,000 and change, should 983,000 and change, will have to is 2.2 million, and do without is roughly $1 million. And you're gonna say, Travis, when I add all those numbers together, it doesn't come near to what Brunton has pointed out for their costs. Again, I do not have any inflationary rates baked into these totals in the summary. They did. So what you could do is if you wanted to say need is what we're doing right away, should can wait 5 years, will have to is 10 years out, we can apply the inflationary rate to those subtotals.
If we do the need and the should, have we completely remodeled the building?
No. So, to just move quickly through all the different documents, then allow council, to have discussion, because this was asked to be prepared and ready to go for this council meeting, by council members wanting it on the agenda. The next document I have in there, labeled 14C, that's the Iowa Code section related to general obligation bonds for general corporate purpose. Fire stations, city halls, that's the classification we have. City of Decorah, with our population threshold, we can borrow up to $700,000 a year without a bond referendum. Anything over that is required to have a bond referendum and receive 60% plus one to pass. However, if we don't put it forward as a bond referendum and council says, we just want to authorize this by resolution, which is allowed by Iowa code, it is subject to reverse referendum. So then there is a stay period that the residents are allowed to petition. And if they receive enough signatures, it could trigger a referendum regardless.
On the 700,000.
Anything less than that, correct? Yep. Yeah, so it is subject to what we call reverse referendum. So council would put it forward first. Special election petition could be filed by the residents. And then we would either be forced to have a special election or not borrow. So that's Iowa Code section 384.26.
Does this city hall and fire department approval work handle the envelope of the building, like your windows and HVAC,
Nope.
like climate
Well-
control?
Most of those are under the will have to. So if you look at, if we go back up to document 14B,
Mhm.
those columns that I have, the total dollar amounts. So like if
Yeah,
we
well,
look down need.
I saw need mechanical. Yeah.
Mhm. So for example, like the under need, we have water valves for the control of HVAC, which was like 20,000. But we don't have the replacement of the water lines themselves that supply the system, which are going to be a have to at some point. And of that have to, several of those are asbestos lined water pipes. So we will have asbestos abatement as
Okay.
well.
I trust you implicitly. And I know that I can see that you've spent a lot of time on this and you live here. Does the need and should get you to a place that you can live if it's your house?
I will say me, yes, other staff, no. For example, I've said it before, Carrie's office, there's a number of times, especially as we transition from winter to summer, when that boiler heat is still on. I mean, this council room has felt it before when the boiler's still
Right.
on. But a number of those water control valves have failed. That's part of that 20,000 in that need to replace. So I'd hope that would address the issue within the HVAC of the administrative portion of the building. But there's two offices in the admin side that routinely 80, 85 degrees. And I'm sorry, but this frame would not survive that on a daily basis. So, no, is the short answer
Okay,
for you.
it's fair. I'm need, should, and we'll have to, are all good silos for us to understand the impact financially. And, I think you've done a really good job of that. I just want to know when in decision-making, what the finished product's gonna be.
Mhm.
Because if I remodel my house and I use paint and I make it look really nice and I flip it, that's a good decision, right? I've made money. But if I'm a taxpayer and we spend $900,000 to do things that we absolutely have to, but we also exercise deployment and downtime and, relocation and the hassle. When you're going to remodel, either remodel or decide to build a new house, right? Like we have to make that decision. So I wanted to know if it was a house that you could live in. So I appreciate your candor.
I think that's sort of how I look at it too. I'm actually working for the DNR this summer and they just had to tear down the Wallace building in Des Moines. We've been to the Wallace building. And part of it was just because they tried for so long to do just enough that eventually just doing just enough wasn't enough. The building wasn't habitable and now they have to build a whole new facility, right? And tear that one down. I'm a little worried that we might be trying to do the same thing without, this idea of we'll have to me is just more expensive over time. When I look at that column, I think more expensive over time. And so does it make sense to create, a municipal building that now will last us 50 years as opposed to nickel and diming us through the future? And I don't know how we analyze that. But I hear what Ross is saying, and I guess I lean towards we're not trying to flip a house here. We're trying to build a municipal building to last and meet the needs of the city for the next 50 years, as opposed to just slapping some paint on it. So
It'd be a place that you want to work and
yeah,
live.
right.
And the public wants to come to.
Right,
Right.
and can.
Right, right.
Because,
Yeah.
so yeah, thank you for this. I think it'll be good to digest. And where do we stand on the real estate for the rest of this campus?
It is in the Army Corps, and so the Army Corps of Engineers does all like the land lease stuff for the Army Reserves. It's in their court. The last communication I had with them is we are on schedule for a fall release.
Okay,
But again, as part of that release, we have to construct a new fence out there for that one
Right.
area.
got paving and you've got paving and restructuring of traffic flow in this, right? I saw you had paving
Or
for this campus. Wasn't that in here?
oh, I'm sorry. Are you moving on to like 14, one of the other files in there?
Is it cool before we do that, Ross, if I can weigh in on the document we're looking at together first?
Certainly.
Thanks. I think Emily and Ross are correct that, it's not a desirable goal to limp the building along for 5 years at the cost of millions of dollars and then need to tear it down anyway. I think that that's, a well taken point. I also think that getting to the point that we are today here and at the Gunderson hangar building and, sort of maybe in other facilities in the city represents a lack of proactive maintenance and investment in our infrastructure and the development of a capital improvement plan that's cultural in this city, or maybe in a lot of cities. I think it's not unique to Decorah by any stretch, but I think it'd be good leadership on our part to work to change it, such that future councils aren't saddled with the same thing. Even if you look at sort of all of the spending that's being recommended by adding up your needs should and will have to columns, it's a big number, but it's a number that pales in comparison to the number it would cost to tear down and rebuild new. And the maintenance costs in this building, the maintenance costs on an $18 million new fire station will probably be about what we're going to have to spend on this building over the course of the next 10 years to accomplish a lot of these goals. $700,000 a year in bonding is one of the ways the state allows us to spend money, without they cap so many ways, the ways that we can collect more taxes, collect more revenue, but we can collect money to repay debt. You know what I'm saying? Like, so this to me seems like, I just want to take this seriously. Yes, it's a big problem, but like the alternatives are, I would say, equally onerous problems. The alternatives being saddling the city with, you know, a tremendous amount of debt versus spending a lot of money on this building. And I guess I wouldn't want to end up after having spent $4 million with HVAC that isn't working for a couple offices. But I gotta think somewhere in $4 million, or at least somewhere between 4 million and whatever a new building would cost, we could fix that too. So that's, I want to look seriously at this option. That's where I'm at.
And I guess I don't know that I'm not necessarily suggesting we build a new building, but I would rather see us heavily remodel, and I mean heavily. And think about how to best utilize the space, which may involve moving administration somewhere else if needed, or park rec somewhere else. I think the location of the space is ideal for a fire station. So I just don't want to see us, like I said, not doing what we should do, what needs to be done and what will need to be done. That to me, it doesn't make sense to put that debt into the future, right?
Well, and I think with Vesterheim, we have seen the prime example of strategic remodeling and addition in the C3 district. I mean, that new building just wasn't tacked on, right? They looked at the totality of that block and did it right. I think we can do that with this. And I think it also gives us a framework of preservation of a historically important building. I mean, we're seeing what it would take. And I'm sorry, I know I'm skipping ahead, but that's why I wanted to know about the campus plan, because if we need to add additional bays or add on evidence storage or whatnot, but this is a great starting point. So I think this is a good point for discussion. It certainly shows us that it's economically feasible to do what we need to do just to exist and not have deferred maintenance, because you've done that full exercise as well with your other analysis with all the crawling around and whatnot. So I appreciate this. I don't think we're going to solve it tonight.
But I would like a timeline tonight. I mean, I've been on council for 5 years and we've been talking about a fire station for 5 years. And I do think we need a timeline of when and how we're going to make this decision, because we need to make this decision.
Does staff know what it would take to get a proposal from a company for a staged investment in the current building at the tune of, 400 to 700,000 a year for a period of years to get us to where we need to be?
So you're saying give a scope that here's the identified improvements we need within the building. What would be your phased approach, knowing that your limit is $400,000 to $700,000 annually?
I mean, that's just that's my question. Another question maybe the council should ask is, would the city entertain a bond that we had to vote on? I think this is a building that has proved its worth, and I think that people would vote in support of maybe just doing it all at once, which would be a much less awful process. So I'm kind of curious about which way to go forward.
I would rather do it all at once. I mean, I think that there is truth to the fact that we can levy for debt. So I would hate to see us tying our hands and everything else we want to do, because we're committing ourselves to $500,000 every year of our budget to the fire station, which to me is a capital project.
Just to clarify, I would want to bond the $500,000, but we don't have to pass a.
Oh, every year bond $500,000. Wouldn't we get a better interest rate overall if we just sort of did it all at once than trying to play the market over years?
I'm not going to shake that crystal ball.
Okay.
But what I will say is that you can always refinance and that rate can go down, but if we borrow today, this sounds like a banker, but the best time to borrow with interest rates is today, because you can always refinance to lower rates. But if rates go up, you've locked in a lower rate.
And it does seem for continuity of really doing the building, it makes sense to do it at once, right? I mean, if you just sort of piecemeal, I just feel like things get more expensive.
Well, and especially I am pointing out again that even though the council can authorize by resolution anything less than 700,000, it can be triggered by a reverse referendum and everything stopped in its tracks. So let's say the plan is to do 500,000 or so at a time. That is subject annually to potentially even a special election.
Well, I think if you add need, should, will have to, you're up around $4 million.
Yep.
And even if you go at the max of 700,000, you're looking at 6 years before you get that entire project completed. And who knows what kind of money that will turn into at that point in time with inflation and higher interest rates and things like that. So,
I think,
yeah.
I think Stephen really makes an astute point with the comment about our capital improvement plan. We have our strategic planning sessions, fire, public safety, and our municipal building. I think from my constituent standpoint, would be very supportive. I don't think this would be a hard sell as long as we're being judicious about we're not building a temple. If we build something functional and show that we are working we have a history of taking care of what we have. Because Randy has said, in the past that, some buildings don't get taken care of. And I want to make sure that not only are we taking care of what we build, we're looking into the future. So I wouldn't be afraid of bonding in a short period of time necessarily, but I also want to be able to say, okay, John, I also want to spend or suggest that we spend $4 million on a massive deployment of asphalt repaving of the flats before that road's PCI index is completely destroyed. Because when we look at strategic planning and we look at capital improvements, faulty concrete also costs a lot of money. Or, the water department has finished their copper and lead survey, and we have a $6 million obligation there. To make a responsible decision, we need to have that capital improvement plan so that we're not, our borrowing is quite low right now and we have capacity, which is awesome. But I need a bigger picture, and this is in your review, that the capital improvement plan really is the next step for this.
Am I hearing you that you would, maybe I heard this wrong, so I'm just clarifying. You would like to see us throw out a bond for more than just the fire station?
No,
Okay.
I'm saying we need to look at all of our priorities in the next 7 years and say, okay, this stage of this project's going to be, everything is going to be required to at least have a bond. Nothing's going to cost less than $700,000. None of these categories are under $700,000. And so we need to bond, right? But I want to plan. I want a plan of bonding so that we can also advise future councils and ourselves on debt levy. I want to understand the impacts, and that's what a capital improvement plan would do. And we just haven't really worked it, and it would allow us to be able to bond with confidence.
So
No,
Ross, you're not just talking about the city hall in general, you're talking about the entire complex that we have to deal with. In other words, street department, water department, all those
Yeah,
different
I mean,
buildings. Right,
our capital expenses,
right.
because, we had an opportunity this year with the airport, right? 90, FAA money.
Right.
That's money after money is easy.
Right.
Bonding is different. Like when you look at your budget book and you look at Locust, there's a reason that it took 40 years to get that done. Because it was a big number, and we're paying $1 million in interest every year, right? Like, it's a lot of money. And that was 8 to $11 million. I can't remember what it was, but 10? Okay. Yeah. So,
The only thing I will say, and I hear you and I agree with you to some degree, although I will say that again, in the time that I've been on council, every year we do priorities, right? We look at all of these things, we name our priorities, and every time the fire station is there. I mean, I feel like we have named the fire station as a priority, and I get the flats. I mean, I get Ravine Street. I get, all our red roads. But every time we sit down as a council, again, for the last 5 years, the fire station is always at the top of the priority. So to me, we have identified this as a capital improvement that is a priority that needs to get done.
I'm just saying that if we put it if we put it in the plan, it's going to give us a much better idea of what kind of a house we can afford. Because we know that we need to buy a new car, and we know the kids are going to have braces, and we know that they're going to college, and we have to save for retirement. It's the same thing, municipal budgeting is wizardry mostly because of timelines, and it's not like checkbook math, but it's not science. Like,
No, I get it. I guess we don't have something that's a document that says capital improvement plan on top of it. I feel like we have all of those
do.
pieces.
we're
Well,
just not using it.
But I feel like we do have all of the pieces that we have looked at. We look at it during budget season. We've looked at it during our priority planning, and I just sort of feel like, don't we have that document?
We said it as a strategic priority,
Mhm.
but that strategic priority could be 2 million or it could be 15 million, right? That's where we are right now. We need to be able to make a responsible decision on that $2 to $14 million.
I agree with you entirely, Ross, on the absolute essentialhood of getting a capital improvement plan to be part of the council's working long-term planning. And right now, we're not there yet. We need to do it. These kinds of conversations would be easier than they have been. But I do think that like the agenda item tonight, let's put it on a future agenda and talk about it. I'm with you. Like, I hear you, but the agenda item tonight, it has us asking the question, like, I've heard a couple of us say, yeah, we'd be open to trying to pass a bond to fund a serious one-time investment in this building. And I've heard 3 of us say that. I'm curious about others. What you all think?
I think I said that.
Okay.
Honestly, like a lot of you have said, if we don't do something and a one-time cost is just going to substantially increase. We see this in every, aspect of life right now. And if we were to have our costs stable, and to Travis's point, if you do, you can always refinance, but why not lock in now where we're at, where we could have a lower rate than have to wait until tomorrow and say it jumps by, being exaggerative when I say this, but 10%. So
It's not
Well,
exaggerated. I mean,
no,
if you think about
Costs certainly have gone up that much.
if only we had built this 4 years ago.
I like this breakdown on the spreadsheet here, the need, should, will have to, although I would suggest, the HVAC system needs to go into the should.
Yeah.
If we're heating a room to 85 degrees, we need to get some different type of controller for efficiencies down the line. And if that means we have to get a different controllers, if the boilers are good, then it comes down to what's put on the wall in each of those rooms, we control them. And then, energy efficient windows that can be opened also at times. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing that, so sliding some of that over. Right now, we're at 1.9 million on the need, should, would that be closer to 2.5 million if we started sliding some of those HVAC issues over to where you can, control it and control it via computer. So if you're not here, you can control, if we have, that's what Luther College uses, the hospital, the schools, the banks in town here. So they can go in and they can remotely change things. I know Jay Utop's been in Japan and he's checked on things at Luther to make sure they're still running when we have cold snap. We just recently installed it at school and it is fantastic. I can look in each room.
We did that. We did that at the library a long time ago.
Yeah. So
And that was obviously a retrofit.
yeah, we had old system, but we retrofitted it with new controllers that are computer based, and like I said, I can sit down and look at every room and see if I have an issue, and if I do, we can go work on it.
So just so I don't have staff have a mutiny and think, why didn't you put that in should or? The water control valves are in should. That is a $20,000 estimated expense from Brunton that I would hope resolves the issue that we struggle with in those office spaces. To Randy's comment on the electronic controls, updating the controls from, we did replace one of the 3 thermostats on the back wall there. Hopefully that fixed the issue that we had the other night. But there was $100,000. Let's see. I want to say that was $100,000 estimated cost from Brunton that I even may have had in the can live without, was the electronic upgrade of the thermostats.
I think Randy makes a good point, right? I mean, as we think about remodeling it, and we think about our sustainability goals, right? There are things that we probably maybe are in the can live without, although we do have a carbon neutrality goal by 2040 for our own infrastructure. And that money, as we've seen in some of our projects that we've done, right, can save us money, and we can reinvest that money then into our improvements as well. So not to lose sight of that.
So I did find that 100,000. It's in the will have to. So eventually the thermostats are going to fail and we'll have to replace. But that's over in the will have to.
Yeah, just
Do
get
it
it
right
out.
up front.
Yep, climate control, I believe climate control and envelope with windows would go a long way and should be in the column to act on.
I mean, this is part, my inclination in terms of doing this, fixing the current building, I think those are clear enough. But the background here that I think we all need to be aware of is that we've heard from our staff and our fire department in particular that the current space is not adequate and maybe even wouldn't be perfectly adequate after this investment. I'm just hurting because I know what new construction would cost and how it seems very hard to make that math work. And so for me, I don't want to stop at okay, here's everything we absolutely need from Brunton. I mean, I feel like this might be an opportunity if we're talking about passing a bond, it might be an opportunity to talk with our fire department to look at our other space and say, I'm just going to throw numbers out there for another 1.5 million. Again, I'm not construction estimator. Okay. I'm just saying things. We could build an overflow shed on the north side of the campus. We could relocate Parks and Rec off so that there'd be some additional administrative or bathroom space or a clean room, or, we could expand the rural annex. What do we call that? The rural annex, that part. We could expand that to have a safer place for people who are contaminated from a scene to clean off prior to entering the cleaner space inside the building. With our current footprint and serious investments, are there things that we could do to accomplish a lot of our goals without indebting the city, more than $10 million? Like, I feel like if the choice for me is like between spending 6 or 7 or whatever $1 million and really doing as well as we can with what we have and building new and, glass and cement and, trying to have everything we want for twice that, for me, I'd rather have the first option. But I don't want to think that we have to do this as cheaply as possible, because I think there's some serious deficits, and I think it's, especially the safety issues, are very worth investing in addressing.
Travis,
Yes.
what do you suggest as far as how to at least make a step forward on what we're doing here, or making it palatable for what we're trying to consider for tonight?
Okay. So, one of the things I wanted to point out, the next document in Dropbox is to Ross's point, talking about a CIP and trying to time indebtedness associated with projects so that you maintain debt service on a nice even keel. Our next opportunity to do that and achieve a nice even transition from retiring debt to taking on new isn't until fiscal 30, because the way our debt is structured, primarily Locust Road. I mean, Ross had talked about it hadn't been done for 40 years because it was such an expansive project. Well, and the terms were such that doing a short turnaround, and it's a financial liability that you don't want to overextend your loan repayment on a street. It deteriorates. So you don't want to be upside down your loan, right? So the repayment window is fairly condensed though. And so we're paying $900,000 a year on Locust Road.
Are you
That's,
looking on one of your files that you have here?
yes, sorry.
Right, and we're not paying $900,000 in interest. We're paying 900,000, it includes interest, but it's our payment too. Just to clarify something we said earlier tonight, I think at some point someone said there was $900,000 a year in interest, and I'm like, I don't think that it's $1 million in interest.
So it's $900,000 a year total. Roughly it's 800. Now I gotta grab it.
14D.
871, 900 for an annual payment. And if you're looking at that document 14D or page 174 in your council packet, that's a nice little picture that shows a really big green area. That's the debt service payment for Locust Road. And you'll see it has a plateau of our total debt payments that doesn't start to drop until that fiscal 30, when essentially everything, nearly everything drops off.
Disappears.
So there's a couple trains of thought, but the first one we got to get over is if council has an appetite to take on additional general obligation debt, which results in debt service payment for every $40,000 a year, 41,000 and change that we pay in debt service payments, that's 10 cents on the levy that it goes up. So any
Say that
debt
again.
we would take on, the annual payment, 41,000 and change, generates 10 cents for the debt service levy. And we're not gonna see that total dollar amount that we're paying out go down until fiscal 30. So any debt we take on, it's
10
gonna,
cents more.
it's gonna increase the debt service levy. That's just truth be told.
So if we take on a 20-year note on an $8 million remodel or $7 million remodel, what's that look like for the levy? 30, 40 cents? I'm not doing the math. I'm just trying to estimate this or, guess.
Wait, you just said how much if I was thinking if we took a $10 million loan.
Yeah.
Right, divide by 40,000.
Well, it's the payments. It's the payment on the loan. So if we pay that loan over 10 years,
Yeah.
so let's just say we paid it over 10 years and exclude interest and it's $1 million, then we're talking about 25. So yeah, I
$5.
don't know.
All right.
I want
Can you
Travis.
give me
to talk.
dollar amounts one more time? $10 million loan.
Yeah, $10 million loan, $1 million a year. Right?
Sure. What do you think? How could you structure this to do a big remodel
I
here?
would do 20. That's
20
as
years.
far out as you can extend an improvement like this. It's 20 years.
We can always pay it down fast.
Correct. You can do a pre-debt authorization, even withhold more on debt service. So I would do 10 on an annual schedule. We're looking at, that's a monthly pay. Gotta hit calculate, that'll help. Oof. Sorry, that's still loud. So that's a monthly payment of about $66,000 a year. 10 years, 10 million, 20 years at a 5% rate.
So that's 66 a month.
Month.
So 66 a year is $792,000 a year. And you said divided by 46,000 adds a dime to the levy, so $1.70 more on the levy. Maybe,
Better than I thought it would have been, actually.
maybe it would be helpful to continue this conversation if you could bring us some specific, like if you borrowed 8 million for 10 years, if you borrowed 6 million for 10 years, or 20 years, I mean, it might be nice to actually make sure we're getting the math right instead of doing it in committee. Could you, that would be my preference, that you brought us back some repayment scenarios on various amounts borrowed.
Yeah, and I mean, to sell a bond that says that it's gonna cost you $1.50 to get a new fire station and I mean, that's per thousand, that's a pretty good deal. I had a question. Oh, yeah. I mean, what about, so we looked at, are there grants, things that we can levy as a city for this type of thing?
I'm not aware of anything off the top of my head. Most of my counterparts are. It's hard to spend money politically on city hall, municipal buildings. Fire stations are usually the one that you get away with, maybe police stations as well. A lot of them are using ARPA funding to make updates, renovations. I'm not aware of any alternative sources other than trying to bond or getting creative and pairing them with additional projects. For example, and dare I say it, for example, I know of at least one other community that paired a wellness center with their project to move administrative offices into that space, as well as the rec department, and run it out of that building that doubles as a wellness recreation center. So
But if-
sometimes people other cities get creative on the end use.
But if we're remodeling this building, we're remodeling it for a fire station.
Right. So I'm just talking alternative funding. We're gonna be pretty limited.
Even, is there anything in the infrastructure bill? Public safety?
Say short of energy efficiencies and
What about municipal, or what about fire districts?
Yeah, let's establish a fire district.
Well, I'm not being facetious.
I mean it. I'm with you.
Because
I think the county has to.
a percentage of our storage and calls are not ours. We've had this discussion a lot. Castalia, for example, just had a fundraise, they fundraised for their new fire station, right? Was it Castalia? No, this was one of the rural Protivan.
If we became a fire district and we moved municipal offices out of here, we would be able to levy the county, correct?
The fire district would levy the fire district.
Yeah, the fire district to build a fire station could levy the entire county.
They could levy the fire district. They could levy their.
Okay,
district.
yeah.
We're just checking. I thought fire districts have to be established by the county.
I mean, the trouble here is that we cohabit,
7 people.
I mean, that's one hardship, but one of the nice things that, there's a sentiment among some in the county that the city is not the best steward of fire monies. And so to establish a fire district would put that concern to rest. It would stop being our checkbook.
Well, I mean, the only thing is the county's already in this building, right? I mean, the county sheriff's office is in this building too. So it's already, county's deeply invested in this
But they
building.
do pay a separate.
I know, I get they pay a separate, but if we became a fire district, I don't know. I mean, that's a whole nother ball of wax, but
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing that I'm
But-
not that familiar with, but I do know it takes it does say the county board of
It
supervisors.
did, if we just kind of conceptualize how, for example, EMA and dispatch
Mhm.
worked out. Like 911 was an almost insurmountable problem because the cost of CAD upgrades and everything it was too much for us. It wasn't feasible, but as an EMA, it's easier and operational, right? I think if we think about this more strategically versus tactically, I think that's where we are right now.
Well, maybe we shouldn't leave our rural fire partners out of this. I mean, I think our rural fire partners have come to the table in good faith and they know that this is on our agenda. Maybe one of the next steps we do is that we need to talk with rural fire about the new station and their contribution and maybe they would be all in on this idea of a fire district if it got us a new fire station. And I do think if rural fire was on board, maybe the county supervisors would go for a fire district.
So I'm hearing maybe two things that before we have our next discussion, it'd be helpful to have the information about levies and maybe information about a fire district and a conversation with the rural fire. Is that the two things?
You just want the information for that, correct?
I think it'd be good to know what the process is instead of creating it right now.
I mean, I do think rural fire has made the comments that they are saving for eventually, right? Knowing that we need a new fire station. So even at that, you know, so if rural kicks in $2 million, we've now taken a $10 million bond to 8. That's helpful to us.
But you did say, Travis, that comes at the behest of the Board of Supervisors, though?
Correct.
Right.
That ask would have to come from rural fire.
So there's been 2 suggestions for information we're looking at having to bring back.
Yeah, so I have the levies and repayment schedules on multiple amounts and terms, as well as fire districts.
Information on the fire districts.
Implementation. All right.
Travis, do you think it's ill-advised that we're not seriously contemplating a complete rebuild? I mean, do you want to give us advice?
I don't want to say ill-advised.
You don't have to give us advice. I'm
No.
offering you the opportunity.
No, this is one where, as pointed out before, the $4 million total listed in my implementation, the need should, all that doesn't take into account any inflation. So that's already been covered, but it only addresses what is within the confines of this existing building. So as Stephen, as you had pointed out before, it does not address additional bay or elongation of the bays over there. It doesn't have any other spatial needs addressed at all. So that is rehabbing what we have.
Mhm.
Well, then maybe, sorry, go ahead.
I can't say that we can't make do with that. We have been making do. That could prevent us from future offerings as well. You know, whenever we at the fire department, I know there's a lot of different equipment over there that is fairly specialized, and there's a constant rotation throughout the year depending on the season of what equipment is hooked up to pickup trucks ready to go. We look at different inserts that go in the back of pickup trucks depending on the season. So we can make do, but in the off chance we have a grass fire in December, and I say off, but it's not that far off. You know, crazier things have happened, that's for sure. Those rigs aren't necessarily ready to go to fight a grass fire because they've already been winterized. They can't sit out. That equipment's already been put in the shed out back. So we can make do with what we have, but that will limit some of our, I don't want to say responses because I don't want to make it all about the fire department, but it will limit as to what the fire department's able to do, as what the police department's able to do, and to some extent what we as a city can do on the administrative side.
I guess I'm a little confused because I thought we were looking not at 4, but we were getting more, moving towards the idea of 10 with the idea of a total remodel.
Mhm.
And wouldn't that total remodel then also include those space needs?
So if we're getting to 10, if we keep moving through all the different documents in Dropbox, If the number is 10 and the appetite's there of council for that, Dropbox file, oh, we gotta grab that one.
I guess we just ran a number for 10, so I'm excited
Right.
about 10.
Dropbox file 14E is the drawing and conceptual, where 14F is the opinion of probable cost. Now, there is a bit of a date to this. This was from 22. That opinion of probable costs for 14E, which is complete renovation of the existing facility, was estimated at 9.4 million. So if we are talking 10, we're no longer talking that brunt and feasibility and implementation of that. I would recommend council, if we're going to that extent, we're looking more at 14E and 14F.
I guess I thought that's where we had moved, again, because we brought up the idea of the 10. And so maybe I jumped ahead, but
I would say, and maybe in my mind, I just failed to move ahead
I
to the
am-
next document.
I am more excited about, I mean, obviously, I am more excited about this proposal. I mean, we have to also think about growth in the programs that we offer, but what the capacity of the fire department is currently, their limitations. So I guess I was already here in my mind. So
What was the cost estimate on E?
in 2022, this was around
Was
10.
9.4.
9.4.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Travis, that takes everything here and it converts the whole facility into simply fire while also building a pretty big bay addition. Is that the design, right? That I'm
That is
remembering?
correct.
So then we'd also in addition to that 10, need to find room for administration and Parks and Rec and council chambers.
Or alternatively, we can look at that 9.4. Now granted, again, a bit dated numbers, but that is a renovation of the entire existing facility. That's not to be said that the renovation on the, let's say, fire department enlargement side isn't scaled back a bit to still accommodate some administrative space. And I know this sometimes politically is not a very well received notion, but if COVID taught us anything, it's that a number of things can operate remotely or in a hybrid format. So for example, we've talked about, we've got the building official that no longer has a dedicated office space here because primarily most of his job is out in the field anyway, with the ability to go and review different documents. The public works director, we anticipate moving into that office space, but with that being Mike as a grade 4 wastewater treatment plant operator, he is staying out there at the facility. So now that space, we have added a conference table, and just earlier, Carrie and I were talking about what I envision is actually putting a desk and workspace in there so that Mayor Borowski, when she holds office hours, she doesn't hold office hours here at the dais and try and hold meetings out here. The same with, well, when Greg comes in to do review of documents, he's got a space that he can do that. When I hold, anyway, what I'm getting at is we don't necessarily need to have dedicated office space for everyone. So we could scale back the administrative space needs over there if we become more flexible with the way we allow staff to operate.
Well, and on that line, Jeff, as a professional fire engineer, is a rarity in Iowa. You know, I mean, in smaller cities. You know, you're rare to have a full, you know,
Didn't
live-in,
want to call you.
a live-in fire engineer in a city of our size is a rarity. We've been blessed for many years, but our response times may or may not change a lot with having someone staffed and living here. You know, that space is also potentially available depending on how we staff and things like that. So that's something else to look at as attrition happens and whatnot, and our needs. I think it's a fair thing to look at. Especially, you know, the pool table is cool, but it takes up a lot of room. Like your office isn't much, some of these offices aren't much bigger than the pool table space. So, you know, as cool as it is, maybe it's time to let the pool table go. And turn it into a flex space
Well,
or
I think,
something else.
I think with the two assignments to come back, as far as how much the money, when you're looking at the money, that's huge.
Mhm.
But then also to start looking at the potential of how you may work with adjustments and what that would look like as far as a building in this space,
Yeah,
like
and
we
there's,
just talked about.
there's a couple options as far as repayment schedules go that we could front load interest only payments, but I don't know that we want to extend that too far. You know, maybe 2-3 years worth of interest only, and then picking up principal payments where there's maybe only 1 year that jumps up dramatically before Locust Road and others fall off. But we can structure the debt payments in most any way we want.
It would be good to be able to see some information on that.
Yeah, I'll prepare a couple different
Okay.
models.
And then also with the consideration with what you were making as far as looking at potential changes that would make whatever kind of newer facility that you're gonna have, that we would be able to afford that. But I want to make sure we continue to have this on the agenda, because we get to a point where we talk about it and then it gets so massive.
Mhm.
And then pretty soon, it's like
It's
gone.
just-
And I think too, I gotta say, you know, someday we're gonna come in the wintertime and that boiler is not work. I mean, when you're piecing
I
it
can deal with
together
that.
the
I can
way
always
it
put a
is.
jacket on. AC fails, I'm out.
Well, but I mean, you know, it's not gonna last forever.
Would there
And-
be any advantage to going back to having a committee that's working on this? Regular, like,
Is, I know during that discussion,
Yeah.
that is something the mayor retains as an ability to establish a special committee to work on tasks like this. So if
Mhm.
that is something, certainly can. One thing I wanted to point out quickly, because Emily had asked about timeline. Every bit of discussion not every bit, most every bit of discussion I've heard tonight has talked about bonding. This council am I wrong in assuming that council does not want to shoot for a November 2024 bond question?
And November 2024?
Just keep in mind, now we can only do it in the month of November. And I'm assuming the council does not want a November 2024 question.
100%.
We-
November,
That-
No.
we can't do
we
it.
can't
November,
do that.
right.
The
November
school's
25,
doing-
that's the target, which gives us some time to come up with a judicious plan that stewards taxpayer dollars while accomplishing as many of our goals as possible.
and we can do it in 25.
I wanted to point that out for a reason, like, if this isn't on next month's agenda or next meeting's agenda, this isn't likely to move forward anyway until November 20.
I think
No,
we
you-
should keep it on the agenda pretty regularly anyway,
We do- I
because
think we should
25 is coming.
too. But, you know, we're gonna have a bond issue
Yeah, wait.
ready on November 2024.
That said, if there are things that we don't have to bond for on that list that could make massive increases, as soon as we're sure that we're going to work in the existing building footprint and it wouldn't be wasted money that we'd tear something out we just put in. You know, if there's things that we can do to improve the quality of life in here, like for $20,000 or $50,000, we don't need to bond for that.
Are we moving forward on the windows? Yeah, we're.
So there you
moving
go,
forward on
that kind of
windows.
thing. Good to hear.
Like,
Yep.
yeah,
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Discussion on the Water Street stoplights.
okay. Also had council members request this item placed on the agenda for discussion. With the failure of the traffic signal at the intersection of Washington and Water, staff has been monitoring traffic flow with temporary stop signs with Water's intersection of both Winnebago as well as Washington. council members have expressed that they've received feedback from residents and businesses and on the temporary stop signs. This is really for council to discuss on possible moving towards permanent stop sign installations. I know one of those intersections in particular has always baffled me. And now I know Washington, Winnebago used to be two lane streets. But why is there a stoplight at Winnebago still in operation when there's no traffic coming that direction? That one baffles me.
I know for what I've heard things positive, especially at, is it Washington and Water?
Yeah.
For sure. But then also, you know, by doing that, you're right. Then you get to the other, well, why would you have a stop sign at Winnebago and Washington too? So then what it goes is to, is it State Street and
It's the last
Water?
one, yep.
As you go east, yes.
Right.
And we can recycle these controllers, right?
I believe all of them have now been updated, so we could keep for spare, but
Right.
yeah, all have been updated now.
I am strongly in favor of the stop signs. I think there are areas in our community that could benefit from better stop lights. Say, for example, the intersection of College Drive and Locust Road. If we could take those controllers and utilize them in another area, I would be even more supportive.
I have probably heard from 25 different people, and I would say it's 24-1 people in favor. I mean, everybody likes it. It slows traffic down. It does control people going through there, makes it easier for pedestrians. So
It also
no.
helps with our sustainability goals because we don't have idling as
Right.
much.
Right.
So to the question on can they be recycled? Those are closed loop. Are those looped in the concrete signals? Do you know, John? No loops in water. It's all timed. Yeah, so it's all timed. If Locust Road intersection with College is considered, that might be a better candidate for the video that we implemented at College and Fifth. That'd probably be a better option there.
Okay.
So is council in favor?
The only positive I've heard is it doesn't take as long to get through downtown. So if the goal is to get people through it
Right.
without stopping and looking to see what's down there, let's go to all stop signs downtown, because then you can get through town a lot quicker
Okay.
and you don't have to see.
So
what's in
where
the
would you
windows.
start? Then at Mechanic?
Yeah.
And
Or
go all the
Mill.
way through to,
Mill. You could start at Mills.
You could.
Mills the first
No.
one you come to.
So even on Mechanic and Water?
I think Randy's point here is that
Yeah.
there's a downside potentially, that people in going through town quickly won't be stopping and looking in windows and considering, is that right, Randy?
People. I mean, people move a lot slower with the stop signs because they know they have to stop.
Attention to what's around, they're watching the car ahead, they go. You know, it's just, they're not, the idea of the stop lights was get people to stop, and they might look to the left or the right and see something in the stroller and say, hey, let's find a parking place and go. Now you're just following the car ahead of you so you can get through the intersections and
Yeah.
get through downtown as quick as
no, but
possible.
you are doing going at a little bit slower pace.
Yeah, but I think most people that go downtown are specifically
This
going.
is because you got the series of stop lights. Then all of a sudden, oh, there's nothing here. And they go through it, which makes it more dangerous, even though that stop sign is sticking out.
So
They're looking.
you
up
see,
at the stop.
having just stop signs?
I'm saying go back to the stop lights.
Okay, yeah, I guess I,
And at Winnebago and Water, get them set up so that you have a left turn so that people going west have an opportunity to turn while the people going east are still stuck at a red light, not stuck, but staying at a red light. So you got a left turn only to cycle people through. They can turn and straight.
I like the ones that are there with stops, and I would go with Washington and Winnebago with stop signs. I'm
Yeah,
not
and
sure.
I see the opposite. I mean, I see people, because they're stop signs, literally you're gonna go block, stop, people are looking, right? And they're also looking for people, they're looking for pedestrians, they're looking for cars. I mean,
Yeah.
so it
Because
to me, it
kind
makes
of
people more
disappoints me.
attentive downtown than when you're just focused on green, red, green, red, green, red.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
No, yeah, like me personally, I've asked a lot of people about it and, I'll be honest with you, I have mixed feelings of it. And what I've actually heard a mixed bag a lot. I've heard people that drive through town think it's awesome. I've heard people that are pedestrians trying to cross the road downtown don't think it's necessarily that awesome.
You mean with a stop sign?
Yeah, with the stop sign. And you have vehicles that come, park and roll through. And I've seen people roll through the stop signs. And they come up, they get to the stop sign, they look and they go when prior to when you had the stop lights.
Oh, I
It
see.
actually gave those, I mean, we just changed all our stoplights downtown that everybody's red on the four-way intersection to get pedestrians to walk because we're pedestrian friendly downtown. And now it's, you come to the stop sign, you go and you California.
Well, maybe it's,
You know what I'm saying? Cause I see it and I sat down and impact, watch it. I'm like,
well, maybe it's a matter of, you know, like having the two that we've done for stop signs.
Yeah.
Seems to be working good and leaving the other lights for the other.
And I think we also have to, we do have to think about some of the employees downtown currently are visually impaired. And I know if we took out all of the lights,
Mhm.
that crossing for them would be difficult because you don't know. You can't tell what the situation is. And I'm not saying we design for one person, but that person watching them try to cross to get to work was a challenge. And I don't have a good way to solve that, but maybe John does.
So if I may quickly, did those individuals or that individual express that to you?
I was walking with them to
Okay.
work and I said, how do you know?
Mhm.
She said, I don't know. I'm just, I hope people are being watchful.
Mhm. And the reason I asked is because when I was over in Humboldt, we went through this very discussion, and council ultimately decided to go to a alternating four-way, two-way stop sign configuration and remove all the streetlights through downtown Humboldt. And as part of that process included, the Iowa DOT's Living Roadways. Decorah is familiar with that. We've been through it.
Yeah.
But we identified that as a project in that, so it had focus group interviews, including those with disabilities. And we had 2 residents that were visually impaired that in the interview said that the stop sign, because our downtown streetlights do not have the audible cues. And that they have to rely on engine noise and that audible cue to know whether they can walk or not. Well, that only applies if there's an engine sitting there idling. So
Or if it's an electric car, you don't know.
right. And so if it's coming to that intersection, they have to stand there and wait and listen to see if it slows down. Hear if it slows down and stops to proceed or not. And even then, they don't know how long that walk signal, if it's showing walk or if it's the flashing hand. But with a stop sign, yes, you are going to have people roll through, guilty as well, I'm sure. But it is still the law that you are to stop at a stop sign. So the assumption that a vehicle coming up, electric, gasoline, and you hear engine noise coming to the intersection, you should have the expectation that they will stop at a stop sign. And so it is safer for them to cross on that side. And
Denton, where I grew up, had the site saving school.
right.
And it was a large topic of conversation because it was a residential community and a lot of people would come into downtown and their streets are wider in the downtown than ours are. So the crossing distance was even greater. And they still made the transition out of away from signals. And made work to make sure that the crosswalks were up to ADA.
Is it,
oh, go ahead.
well, I was just wondering, is there such a thing that exists where, and if not, we should invent it, where you can hit a button and then all the stop lights actually like light up? So all the stop signs light up so that a driver would be aware?
Oh, so flashing.
So the stop sign would like a visually impaired person would hit a button, as they're about to cross the street. Every stop sign flashes so that anyone driving up to it knows that someone who's visually impaired would actually be crossing the street.
That'd be, I'm sure we'd have to do it by code or whatever. Like it'd have to be like a authorized.
Oh, wait, but I
signal.
just assume that that kind of thing exists.
The MUTCD, right?
That's the one. That's what I meant. Hey, I haven't waited on this and I'd like to just really quickly. We spend on average around 40K a year on traffic controls, and that doesn't count the electricity it costs to run them. They take a lot of maintenance, and people drive into them, and that costs us money every time. And I'm not saying we should have zero traffic controls, but I think our bias should be to only having them where we definitely need them, because they're a tax. Like every one that we have that we don't need is just sort of choosing to raise taxes on the people that we serve to provide something that we don't need. And it feels like the last few months have shown us that we don't need these. I know that some people will experience the change as positive and others as slightly negative. And I can see some of the points that, Randy and Brent have made about how it might change the openness of downtown to people in a car. For my part, downtown, and I think I've heard this from others, just like Kirsten has, downtown seems easier for me to navigate on foot and in a car. Because of this, I can get to where I'm going more quickly and park there. If I'm in a car, if I'm on foot and I'm on one side of the street, it feels a lot easier to get to the other side of the street because I'm not sitting there waiting for my light, or I'm not tempted to jaywalk. You know what I'm saying? Like, for me, it seems like a pretty easy decision. And if we go to this change, it's a fairly cheap change. If we need to reevaluate, we can. I think we should convert them to permanent stop signs and reevaluate if we have to.
We have to bring that back for action. You don't have any action on it.
Well, it would take, let's see, we got to adopt it by resolution, if I remember right, for the installation of stop signs, right? Correct. Yeah, so that's why this is not an actionable item, because there is future action that would have to be taken. But I don't know that we have a general consensus on.
Yeah.
I mean, we can certainly draft a resolution, put it back in front of council for converting those, and there can be further discussion in a vote at that next meeting as
Well,
well.
one of the consideration is, do you do just the certain ones that we have? Yeah, which ones do you do? Which ones you don't do?
Well, and that would be, council can certainly amend on the fly as well at the next
Okay.
meeting.
Okay.
I guess I like the idea of keeping the two that we currently have as stop signs and seeing how that goes. And then we like that, we can proceed with more of them down the road.
I would like staff to draft us a resolution that reflects their recommendation. And that can be the engineer and, streets department manager, all that stuff should be part of that.
Okay. Openings, we have an opening, one on Decorah Human Rights Commission. Library Board, possibly, there's two that are going to be reappointed, one, possibly they may have one. And then I do actually have an appointment to make on July 1st for the Decorah Historic Preservation Commission. City manager and department heads.
There's been a lot of attention on the public parklet program that we are receiving applications for. I think this has been like 2.5 years in the works that staff's been working on this. But anyway, we are expecting delivery next week. And so there are 2 parklets that'll be delivered. SMID financed half, Chamber Security grant for the other half. So far, 3 applications have been turned in. They will be scored. That committee is actually the Chamber President, SMID President, and Decorah Downtown Betterment President. Those 3 will select based on a scoring matrix. and place those two parklets. Again, they are crash test rated. They're the only ones in the country that I'm aware of. That's one of the nice things about these, that pursuing a city-owned program. I know we talked about at the council level, possibly manufacturing our own, concerns around city staff. Not saying they don't have the ability. We've got some very talented welders, but we certainly prefer the crash test rated, dodging the liability, if you will, if a car does hit one. So, and certainly more protective than landscape timbers and cinder blocks. So anyway,
Okay,
that program receiving applications, and we'll start scoring those next week. Let's see, that's all I have, I believe.
Gary? Brent,
Nothing.
Christopher,
Nothing.
Kirsten,
Oh, just a couple quick things. Over the weekend, we had the Decorah's 175th anniversary. They had a big celebration or a big program up here at Vesterheim. They had, I think I'll get it right, the great grandson of Chief Wakan Decorah was in town. They had invited him back. He gave an excellent talk on the history of the Ho-Chunk people in this area. It was a really fascinating day. And the other thing I had, that happened on Saturday as well, they had the initial meeting of the Driftless Water Defenders. If you're not aware of this, they're just getting it started here, but it's trying to look at the driftless region up here and the issues we're having with water in the state of Iowa. Chris Jones, who wrote The Swine Republic, is the president of this organization. He gave part of the talk. It was fascinating. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but if you've read any articles in the paper recently, Iowa is currently number 2 in the country as far as states go in cancer rates. And we're also the only state that is rising in cancer rates at this time.
Number 2 is a bad number to
Right,
point out to people.
Right. And we're currently the only state that's rising in cancer rates. So a lot of it's probably due to our water. If you're interested in getting more information in reference to this program, it's driftlesswaterdefenders.com. And it's a good thing to get involved with.
Steve?
Two things. The first, last weekend, I had the pleasure of joining about a dozen other people who represented various, I guess, constituencies that deal with municipal budgets in Orlando, where we worked with each other as part of a Strong Towns effort to develop a tool that will help cities better understand their budgets, and especially elected officials. Obviously, that's a long time in the future, but for our consumption, I was just blown away by how thoughtful and some of these people were. Some of their solutions were incredible, and I took away from it that some of our issues as a city kind of, we joke about not knowing what our unfunded infrastructure liability is. Sort of we talk about that every year. We don't even know how, far behind we're falling every year on road maintenance. I know we sort of, that comes up every budget year, and then we make it to the next budget year without thinking about it again. But I was chastened, and I thought, that we really should get somehow we need to get our understanding wrapped around that, because otherwise, if we don't know what the future demands on our budget are going to be, how can we plan effectively for today? So I guess I'll probably be talking more about that as we go. The other thing is that I sit with the mayor on the sort of special facility committee related to the new elementary school, and they are making recommendations to the Board of Education probably next week at a special meeting. There's members of the facility committee who tonight, while we were meeting, were making presentations to the Board of Education. Not to get into specifics, because I'm not actually sure what's public yet and what's not. There are some press releases, one that was released a little earlier this week, and another one that will be released tonight when their meeting is concluded, that will talk a little bit more about the process. And just to assure you that the mayor and I have been working hard and diligently to try to advocate for the city's interests as this committee does their work.
Randy?
I have nothing this evening, Mayor.
Russ?
I have been looking into housing models that could be pre-approved through our code with walk-ups that are multifamily. It's a group out of Georgia. I know that you had the small housing group that worked, and we came up with some solutions and things like that. But as in the short term for infill housing, I think it's really important that we somehow work to incentivize certain types of development. So I'm looking at seeing how much it would cost to bring a consultant who's been doing this in Georgia, where they're doing the pocket developments to kind of support what we just passed for planned urban development ability in Decorah. And it would incentivize multifamily stick-built housing, kind of like what similar to what Quandals have been doing, but on a smaller scale that's a little more homeownery.
Okay.
So I'd like to work with Travis on that. Yeah, homeowner rates.
Emily?
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we are going to go into closed session for the city manager's review. So I need a motion to go into closed session. Motion made by Zittegruin,
Second.
seconded by Hadley.
And John, do you want him to state who's going in? Because I did want to offer that if you want to include Carrie as she can talk about the day-to-day, I'm perfectly fine if you want to have Carrie in on the conversations as well.
I think that could be valuable, yes.
May I rephrase my motion?
Yes,
I
please.
move that we enter a closed session with council. Travis, Carrie, do you want John in there, Travis? Nope. And the purpose
Let's
is,
go home.
yeah, the purpose is to evaluate the professional competency of an individual, per Iowa Code 21.5, subsection 1.
Okay,
No, I don't.
roll call.
I'm sorry,
We
the
need a
second
roll-
was,
The second was Ross.
thank you. Zittergruin,
Aye.
Hadley,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Misselinich,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Chisel, Neal.